something was wrong with, because I kind of had a criteria of who could be my friend. I had conditions on what my community could be. They had to kind of like read my books, read the same books, have the same politics. Otherwise, we'd sit around supper tables and deride each other. So I found myself hanging out with a tribe, and a comfortable tribe. But that criteria wasn't bringing me a full life, wasn't bringing me a full world. I felt lonely. I'm a patriot. I love my country. My father and my brothers fought in the wars. They're buried here. They're who I am. So how do I deal with this? And this is the state of mind I was in when Jocelyn Lee, on 2019, asked me to put a piece of sculpture on top of the roof of the Speedwell building in Portland, Maine. It was a dark November night. The reason that's important is I went outside to take a look at the roof, and it was dark, and our state is dark. And I said, I'd like to do something with light. And it's a car route. And I said, I love car culture. I come from Lewiston. We're car culture. We're not boats and lighthouse culture. We're on the other side of the turnpike. We just think differently. I mean, cars are a big deal to us. Fast, hard cars. I was thinking, like, let me bring that into the picture. And I had been doing some neon work, and I ran into some people at the Neocrash sign shop. I bumped into the shop, and I went, my God, I can't believe you make things like that here. And he's big, burly guy. The guy owns it says, yeah, what do you want to do? I said, well, I'm going to think about it. Then I saw the roof, and I said, I want a marquee sign. I want to do that. Now, the reason I wanted a marquee sign is because something I've been wanting to do. I remember when I was a kid and the American highway system was built, and we celebrated by taking rides in our cars to go see each other. And motels and swimming pools and restaurants would invite us to play miniature golf. There'd be arrows pointing at things. There'd be flamingos, those crazy, wonderful signs. There's a giant cactus still on the way into Boston. And people would travel and go, can you believe this? They would go to every state in the nation. They plaster the state stickers all over their cars, celebrating the America that they were curious about. Now we put stickers about what we don't like on our cars. I don't want to be cynical. That was a lousy joke. But what I'm trying to get at is it was a time when people cared and were curious, and I felt integrated. I wanted that. So the marquee sign represented that to me. Car culture, optimism, positivity, go see the world, see what we're about. And then a word. I had to come up with a word because that's kind of a big part of this. And if I got the word wrong, I wouldn't be here speaking to you today. But it wasn't that hard, because you got to think. Sometimes artists don't think. We just do, and we figure it out later. And that's whole part of this story too. I wrote down hopeful, and that was to tell me to get up and go, to be active, to be positive. I wanted to flatter my best instincts with that word. I had a friend help me out right with the car font. We came up with a font that was from a 1948 Packard, a placard that has car font. So this is car culture we're playing, and that's the art part. Put some arrows and some colors and some bling and made art piece. And it showed up one day, late April in 2019, on the back of a great big tractor trailer truck, 24 feet. And that thing went up on the roof, and a couple hundred people came, at least that night, and they flipped the switch. They actually asked me to do the countdown. I didn't want anything to do with it. I didn't know what was. And they flipped that switch. The Oppenheimer movie, I don't know if you saw it or not, but there's a moment when he sees the bomb. They're like, oh my God. And I went, oh my God. Everybody, I was seeing the faces, they're smiling, they're cheering, the cars are going by. I just didn't know if I wanted this responsibility now. I don't know if you know, but it's not easy being a hopeful guy, okay? Because I'm an old hippie. I haven't liked anything for 6 decades. So now I'm re-switching my narrative and finding my own kind of redemption in my own work. So I'm thinking, then I don't know what to do with this. And I just kind of go away for a while and let it kind of cook. And then I put one up in my hometown in Lewiston. And then COVID hit. And then we all had time to think, didn't we? Plenty of time to think. So let's leave it there at that time, and let's talk about Lewiston. We are all Lewiston. I am heartbroken about what happened in Lewiston. Those fine, decent, wonderful people That is not who they are. And their suffering is so sad. And I will recognize it forever. I lit a hopeful sign in Lexington Park, Maryland, in Southern Maryland 2 weeks ago. And I said the same thing. I will tell everybody about Lewiston. I will never forget what happened in Lewiston. Neither should any of us ever. And always, always, always tell them you love them and be part of them, because what they suffered is just around the corner for all of us too. When I think of Lewiston, I think of that. It's full of cracks, I said. But Leonard Cohen said something beautiful. He said, the light comes in through the cracks. There's a remaking can happen if we all help each other and believe in each other through that. The light coming through the cracks can shine on us too. They can be part of our growth, and our community could grow through that love for each other. So I'll leave that sadness aside and talk about my grandparents who migrated here. I'm third generation French Canadian. Now, you're going to say, how did Hewitt become French Canadian? And that's true. I am. My dad was an interloper. He was a sailor at the Brunswick Navy Yard. He met my mom working at the Bath Iron Works, and they married, and I got the name Hewitt. But as Obama identifies Black, I identify as a French Canadian, and I always will, because I got my cadence, my life, my rhythm, my French identity, my faith from that community, and I'm proud of it. My grandmother and my grandfather immigrated from Quebec along with their uncles, their aunts, their brothers and sisters. They came down the rivers to these mill towns. Let's use the mill town. They're ubiquitous in Maine. They came to Lewiston to work. There was work in the factories. It was dreary conditions. It was repetitive labor. And these fine, lovely, lively people took to the work and were grateful for it. It made enough money for them to clothe, feed, and house their children. And they were becoming integrated into the community, but they faced a horrible, horrible condition. And the hostility was the Ku Klux Klan. I'm talking about guys with pointed hats and eyeballs and burning cross. They were here in Maine. There were 120,000 KKK members in Maine in 1920, and they were mobilized to intimidate the French Canadians for coming down. Now, this is too repetitive a narrative. They had a rally in Portland, Maine. 10,000 Ku Klux Klan members came to tell these French people to beware, to be frightened. Now, they're not going anywhere. They can't go anywhere. They came here to have a life. But what happened to my grandparents, and it was they became intimidated. They weren't safe. So what happened? They were derided for their language, being French. They were derided because they had large families. These large families are going to eat up all the natural resources. You haven't heard this before, right? So we have families, language that's un-American, not speaking English. They're going to take our jobs. They're not going to contribute to the culture and create an economy. And they were just basically different, and they couldn't be controlled. So the first generation of my family, and into the second is systemic, actually now, they became intimidated by the rest of the world. And because of that, this is what happened to them. They lost their worldview. That is a terrible thing to take away from a whole culture. They don't get a chance to go out and explore that America I'm talking about and find out how same we are, how funny, how brilliant, how uniquely screwed up this country is, how wonderfully creative and powerfully glorious country we are in our flaws and all our conditions and the way we go through, stumble through things. They never found America. They just had to stay in their towns because there were burning crosses outside of their communities. So, but that's a sadness, and this is an immigrant story. But they stayed, they persevered, they prevailed, because they became part of a vibrant part of a fabric that became Lewiston. If you were on Lisbon Street in the 50s, you would hear music coming out of the social clubs. You hear Zyda going, you're laughing and dancing. A French Canadian wedding, and the first 30 minutes is more fun than any Protestant WASP wedding until they're finished with the honeymoon. I mean, you're passed from aunt to aunt, kissed and noogies by your uncles. It's just a wonderful, crazy culture. And I want them and any of you here who are French to know I celebrate you. Well, they prevailed and they contributed, and Lewiston and Auburn prospered. It actually made it was an economic engine in Western Maine. And that was the community I was raised in. I was born there. And I'm going to tell a story about two boys and a river, the Androscoggins River. The first boy's me, Charlie, and I'm a young boy walking along the Androscoggin River. And me and two friends, and we see a basketball out floating in the river. Now, we're not supposed to go in that river. The river's a very, very dirty river, but you can't keep a boy and a basketball away from each other. And who would know anyway, right? So I was the guy, I went out, we held hands, and I was up to my shins. I get the basketball, and I bring it back to shore. I look at it, it's concave, it's broken, it's no good. We threw the ball down. I look up, right there's a police officer. He says, come over here, boys. And boy, we're in trouble. If you get, a cop does not come to your house, I would have been locked down till I was middle-aged. It wasn't, so we were like, he said, I want your names, wrote down in his book. I want to know where you live, and I want to meet all of you here tomorrow at 9 o'clock in the morning. You hear me? 9 o'clock. We were there at 8:30. We're sitting on our stoops, and here comes, listen to this. His cruiser pulls up. He opens the trunk, and he takes out baseball bats, gloves, T-shirts, hats. He created a baseball team. We were just other. Nobody ever saw us down there in the tenements. We became the New Auburn Ramblers. He saw us. I love that man. I will never, ever get to thank him. But you know something? I know he was a happy man because he saw us kids. He did his job. He wasn't using his gun, his weapon, his badge, or his ticket book. He was here to help us. It meant a lot to me because he saw Charlie Hewitt. He saw me. Here, it's the guy standing in front of you right now. He saw me. And I love that. I never forgot it. Never should I forget it. And I always want to give back to that community because of that. But at the same time, there's another boy on the other side of the Androscoggin River, living in the tenements of Little Canada. He's walking through his town too. And that young boy, he grows up to be a man and becomes a very good businessman. Then he runs for mayor of Waterville and wins. And then he goes on to win 2 terms as governor of this great state, Paul LePage. He's the same age as me, same conditions, same background. But you know, when he won, I didn't like him because he wasn't my narrative. He wasn't my guy. So what I missed is a letter I could have written. Dear Governor LePage, I know who you are. I see you because you and I are more alike than we're different. Outside of the politics, we're brothers. You understand? This community raised us. They raised us up. And I celebrate what you've done to become governor. I won't vote for you, but that's not what is important. See how much we miss out in life and seeing people. We're going to put politics and ideology ahead of what we see. We sometimes miss the glory, the grace in human beings and who we are as a community. All right, that's an important thing. I didn't even know I felt that way till I was writing this speech. You know that? I didn't even know it. And I'm so happy I've come to that realization. So maybe I'll write him a letter. I don't really like him, but maybe I'll get him. I don't, I mean, this thing's, like I said, it's driving me crazy, this thing. So the virus ends. And there's an enormous amount of energy in the country. Everybody's expansive and everything's happening. Hopeful took off with it. It's gone from Portland to Lewiston to Bangor to Augusta to 7 states. It's gone on electronic billboards at the exit to the Lincoln Tunnel. It's gone for a year up on electronic billboards in Newark, Philadelphia, the Bronx, Queens. It's been on Manhattan, on the High Line in Manhattan on 23rd and 10th Avenue. It's become ubiquitously used in pins and bumper stickers. It's growing. It's really a phenomenon. And it's really kind of just amazing that this is happening. And there's now, this year alone, there's going to be one in Ellsworth and one in Bath next about 2 months from now, Presque Isle, Millinocket. God bless them. Millinocket, right? Millinocket's going to get one. We're going to get one way or the other in Millinocket. And Waterville, Westbrook, Lisbon's talking to me. The visitor center on the main turnpike, they want one. So this is quite a remarkable thing. And this week, one went to Western Yurosgrad, Ukraine. They're lighting it next week as soon as if. So, yes, thank you. I mean, in the 5 years Hopeful's been around, it's like an old flag now. I mean, it survived the COVID, a national election, the shootings in Lewiston, Ukraine, and heaven help us, another election. It's been a constant. And I kind of find that remarkable that things takes on its own identity in its own kind of way. And it's significant. What's significant really about it, and it's what I really believe in my heart, it's unique to Maine. This can only happen here. In a small state that sees each other, hears each other. There's something about these signs that are lighting up main streets that are connectors to who we are. There's a pride attached to it. The pride not attached to me as Charlie Hewitt, the artist. I'm different than that piece. We're separated. I'm separated from it ego-wise. I'm the author. I'm not the artist. And that's how I truly feel. Now, and you know, we're a big state and we have a small population, but we see and we hear each other. We're not a wealthy state. We're not rich, but we're resourceful and we're generous. We share very, very difficult winter. There are dark, cold nights. There are weather events. And with that in mind, we know we have to depend on each other. And that is the conditions that create our character, our authenticity, and our decency are a big part of who we are as a people. And this faith in each other can be exported, just like our blueberries, our lobsters, our timber, our LL Bean boots. Along with this commodity of light, this can be exported south to the rest of the country. And we can tell, we can become a beacon of light here in Maine. And we can tell our fellow weary citizens that hope abounds, that it comes to them from a small state, dark state of humble means, but it comes to them from a state of goodwill and character. And our legacy can be a legacy of light because I think we are important to the rest of our country. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie Hewitt, for sharing your beautiful remarks. And I love this new line of making Maine the beacon of light and hopeful. A couple of things that I wanted to point out that we didn't say in the introductory speech was that during our conference, we also have two virtual co-hosts that are joining us. Isha Khan, the project manager for Maine Health, and Peter Osborne, the director of educational services at the Maine Municipal Association. During our time, you'll have 4 conference tracks: hire talent, workplace retention, partnerships, and DEI practice. If you're confused about where you're going, there's a couple of locations that we're going to be at throughout our 3 days. There's a map and you can access that with the QR code, as well as our food menu options. That information is on there as well. So our next speaker is Julia Trujillo Luengo. She's the I love Julia. Thank you so much for speaking. Julia is the director of strategic planning management at the Maine Community College System. She's served in a number of important roles in the state and municipal government, including the State of Maine Economic Development Plan Implementation Director, as well as the director for the Office of Economic Opportunity at the City of Portland and Maine State Director for the Office of Multicultural Affairs. I'm inspired by the work that Julia does on a daily basis, and I'd like to welcome her to the stage. Thank you.
Oh boy, I'm a little shorter than Charlie is. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a daunting task to go after Charlie, but I will do my absolute best. Good afternoon. Buenas tardes. My name is Julia Trujillo Luengo, as Margaret said. I work for the Maine Community College System, and it is a big honor to be with you this afternoon. I recognize a lot of familiar faces. I see many new faces, which is a great journey that we're going to be embarking on the next 3 days. So I challenge you to challenge yourself and stretch yourself and think and rethink and be part of this adventure with us. Let's see if I can figure out this clicker. There, going back. Okay. So immediately, at first, I was challenged a little bit by this concept of being hopeful. I was of the belief at the time when the signs started to come up that being hopeful meant more so of a passive term and something that you just kind of sat back and the conditions and you sort of needed to wait for those conditions to occur. So I struggled with it a little bit at the beginning. And then when I started thinking why that was, I thought of my mom. This is my mother. She's about 9 years old under a fruit tree. I am originally from the Canary Islands of the coast of Morocco. You see it at the top of the map. But my mom is from a different autonomous community in Spain called Extremadura. You see at the bottom of the map, which is located between the capital of Madrid and Portugal. Extremadura is known for many different things, just like Lewiston. One of those things is that it's the least resourced autonomous community in Spain, with the highest poverty rates, highest low literacy rates, and that's where she was born and raised. I'll go back to my mom to tell you a little bit more. And this picture is about 12 years after the Spanish Civil War ended. Is in the midst of the post-war era in Spain, which was a brutal time in our country. And it's just the very beginnings of a dictatorship that lasted until the late 1970s. My mom is the youngest of 5 siblings. 3 of her oldest brothers lived in a farm. Extremadura is well known for sort of its agriculture, is really the what sustains the state. We're often called the Florida of Europe because we're the ones that grow the vegetables and the fruits for the rest of the continent. But when my mom was little, she lived in this tiny little town of about 100 people. And the reason being is that her oldest brothers were in the farm, but she and her older brother remained in the little village until they could complete 3rd grade, because that is all that was offered at the town. And my grandparents wanted to at least for her to get that education. What happened was that when she got to 3rd grade, a teacher went to my grandparents and said, she has a lot of talent. You should do what you can to push her forward in her education. So my grandparents made the hard decision of contacting a school of nuns about 4 hours away from where she was born and raised. And they sent her off. She never went back home. So my mom sort of had to create this journey for herself. And I struggled with that notion of hope because she had to do so much on her own. But then I realized that dreaming and being hopeful is part of the transformation. That if she was not actively hopeful and she did not have this goal in mind, she would have never made it all the way through. So contrary to what I thought at the beginning, and I think as Jamila Duncan, who's a very well-known Black scholar, if you haven't read her article, Radical Dreaming, I highly recommend it. Dreaming and being hopeful is not this sort of fuzzy Pollyanna thing. It actually does take a lot of acute vision, a lot of hard work, and just a lot of yourself in drafting this journey of yours. So when we think about our role, and when I think about dreaming and being hopeful, to me, we're all dream holders. And it raises for me that sense of responsibility that I've held when I've been in public policy positions as a politician like Tay. It, to me, is really that transformative moment that carry us forward with purpose. And it raises the accountability to do better, to push ourselves so that people like my mom and like many others, like many of us in the room, don't have to kind of deliver that dreaming on their own. When I was at the Maine Department of Economic Development, in 2019, we drafted the first economic development plan in 20 plus years in the state. In a way, we were dreaming what our state could look like in the next 10 years. Because at the end of the day, that's what a vision really is how do we set a target? How do we set a set of goals that hold us all accountable? And how do we continue to dream? So when you think about plans or policy, I would encourage you not to completely disregard it as something that is on a shelf, but it's truly a living document and the hard work of many people. Moreover, the strategic plan also set us in a position that when COVID happened, only 3 months after the plan was published, we had a roadmap. We had a blueprint as a state that allowed us to invest quickly and with a degree of discipline that other states didn't have. So it was just a seed for us to move our work forward. I put some other examples here in the slide, whether we talk about climate change, whether we're talking about our housing and complex challenge, our transportation. They are roadmaps that we have in front of us that help us achieve those goals. Last year, Commissioner Johnson tasked us that wasn't enough. We had to do a reset. A pandemic had happened. We needed to revisit this economic development plan. We had to continue to set our dream and keep that dream in place and our vision and our 3 goals. But we could look at all the actions and all the elements that we had considered to see what is working, what is not, what else could we add to this plan that addresses the relevant challenges of today. So that's how this reset that just actually came out last week was born. I don't know if Phoenix is here. Phoenix is our fearful leader right now that is leading that effort. One thing that this reset did is that it brought together, because of being courageous, workforce development and economic development into one strategy. So talent, which is why a lot of you are here today, is key to both of these disciplines, but they had always sort of stayed in 2 separate islands. This strategy brings both elements together. In terms of the 3 goals that were set by the 10-year plan, we're doing relatively well on all 3 goals. We're at 10% of our real wages growth. We're in about 13% in the value of what we sell per worker. And probably the one that has stuck the most with folks, the 75,000 mark, we're about 13,400, which is the one that I'm gonna dive a little bit more deeply in if I can see the slide from here. So when we talk about the components of population change in Maine, here you see 2021 through 2023. The big changes really occur at the end of 2020 through 2020, at the end of 2022. If you see on the left-hand side, the growth that occurred in the last centennial, 2010 to 2020, was almost equal as the growth that happened in solely almost 4 years. So it tells you that our population and our demographic winter that we've been talking about for 1,000 years is indeed changing. So we can be hopeful. When it comes to our racial makeup, here you see that there has been significant change in our population over the last couple of years. And in the population growth that happened in 2022, 61% of our total growth was due to our non-white, non-Hispanic population. almost 9% due to our Black African American population, and almost 6.5% our Hispanic population. I always like to use this slide, and I think Amanda Rector and I thank the state economists for sharing this information, but foreign-born and racial diversity and ethnic diversity is not the same thing. So I try to overlay this so we have a better understanding of who our neighbors are. So if you look at, for example, the first bar, and I'll just point out some references, our white alone category tells us that most of our foreign-born population in Maine are non-white. When we talk about our Black or African American population, is most 50-50. 50% were born in the United States, 50% were born outside of the United States. When you look at the Asian category, and I should say these are all federal racial flags and categories, the Asian category is most of our Asian community are born outside of the United States versus in the United States. And for our Hispanic population is the opposite. Most of our Hispanic population in our state was born in Maine versus born some outside of the country. The median age, the good news is that, yes, we still have the biggest share of our older population in the country, but we were one of 2 states where our median age actually went down. This is an overlay of how important our migration is if we compare it to our natural birth, and to just make sure that we continue our efforts in our talent attraction. In our civilian population by age, it just gives you a sense of how we compare to the United States, particularly in the 65+ category. And I should say here, it doesn't show it in the graph, but our labor force participation among our prime working age, which is 24 to 54-year-olds, is actually higher than the national average. So when I hear questions like, where did the people go? Most people are working in that bracket. So you have a very small margin of folks who are not working in those ages. What I'm most proud, I think, in this reset is that it speaks about prosperity for all. So it's not all dandy and beautiful and successful. It also speaks to where we need to do more work, which I think is also where we're not delivering sort of that hope. We're all here from different areas and sectors, and I think we all play a role, whether it's industry or higher ed, not only the state government. So I've here put some examples of what the University of Maine system is doing to try to push the needle and really deliver on these dreams. I now work for the Maine Community College system. We just approved a new vision 2 weeks ago that moves us from being very student focused to really amplify our reach to employers and also our people who really make our impact every day. We are trying to transform and really set really bold goals, meet full financial need of all our students. Free Community College is a big initiative to achieve that, but we're doing that in multiple ways. We're trying to change the paradigm shift of our students college ready to are we student ready as institutions to really deliver to the student of today, and really expanding our workforce training opportunities to just try to offer as many on-ramps, as many paths for all our students as we can. These are just some statistics that I like to go into the uncomfortable. So I know that not every high school graduate moves forward to post-secondary options. But we're trying to explore how can we increase that number. This is a national average, but it's even lower for low-income students, which is 36%. What are we doing with our international trained professionals, those that have college or other training from abroad, and we're currently not seeing them in our community college system or our university system? So my challenge for you today is, what are each other's dreams? What are each other's hopes? And what are common responsibilities to help achieve them? I don't know how many of you have my middle schooler. I don't have a teenager like Tay just yet, but almost. The book When Stars Are Scattered. Omar Mohammed, the author, just came to Maine 2 weeks ago. And he reminds us that, sometimes when you look at stars, and I'm going to quote him, to the untrained eye, the night sky is a scattering of stars. a chaos of light and dark across the universe. And yet the stars are not lost. They form patterns and constellations. If you know how to look, there are stories woven into the very essence of stars. So our stories, our dreams, our hopes, our roadmaps and blueprints for ourselves, for our organizations. And I always like to say to folks, get proximate to these stories. When I speak of diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging is really about being our true selves and allowing for that messiness of getting to know what our individual and collective dreams are in order to draft a path forward. So remain hopeful. This is my mom. 25 years later, this is the King of Spain. She received this award because she was the fifth student in the country. She graduated law school through full scholarships all her career, and she had the best academic record in the country. She used her scholarships to help her brothers who were not as fortunate as she was, and then she dedicated her entire life. This is probably about 20 years after the fact, as a public servant to make sure that opportunity and dreams were available system-wide. And then just to end it, I also like to always say to people, let's try to meet people not where they are, but where they dream. Thank you.